pledging to use his newfound freedom and his celebrity to reform the U.S. criminal justice system. He left prison in style yesterday, heading from an SUV to a helicopter for a ride to the Philadelphia 76ers playoff game. Now, while at the game, he rang the team's ceremonial bell. The Sixers are just some of the people who had been calling for Meek's release. Now, he was jailed last fall for violating probation on a 10-year gun and drug charge. Influencers like Jay-Z, Kevin Hart, and 76ers co-owner Michael Rubin were among those speaking out against his 2 to 4 year sentence. Well, yesterday, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ordered the judge to release him immediately on unsecured bail. Now, on his release, he tweeted, and I quote, "To the Philly District Attorney's Office, I am grateful for your commitment to justice. I understand that many people of color across the country don't have that luxury, and I plan to use my platform to shine a light on those issues." Now, Ekow Yankah is a law professor at Cardoza Law School. He says Mill's case is a great example of things that are going wrong on all sides with the criminal justice system. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So just sort of, if you could hammer on the specifics, why was he actually released?
So in fact, in some ways the question is, why was he in prison? So he's violated his probation. To be sure, he's violated his probation time after time after time. And in this way, Meeks really is a great example of what real people look like. Despite his celebrity, it's the case that real people make bad decisions or problematic decisions. The difference is this man has spent more or less his entire adult life on probation. And so the kinds of bad decisions that you and I might make that count as silly or boneheaded, for him count as criminal. And there's one judge who, for again, his entire adult life, has had the power to decide when any bonehead decision he makes will send him back to jail. And she did so over the recommendation of the prosecutor and the DAs, who all said, look, we can't imprison everybody for every technical violation of probation. And finally, the Superior Court said, that's right, that's enough. He has to go free.
You wonder what's going to happen with this judge. But in the meantime, while all this case was festering, Philadelphia got a new district attorney. That's right. And the new DA is saying, well, we need to do away with some of these strict sentencing guidelines. Put this into context for us. I mean, Philadelphia is a black city where you have sort of an extraordinary amount of people of color who are really on the boot of the criminal justice system. That the DA would come out and say that these sentencing guidelines need to be reformed. What are we to make of that?
I think one of the good things that's currently happening is that we're turning our attention as a society to some of, if I may say, the less sexy things that happen in the criminal law. I also have an opportunity with people I respect tremendously to work on death sentence cases and releasing people from prison through DNA. And of course, there you're saving lives, and so that matters. But when you see somebody on probation, the way in which your life can be quietly unraveled by misdemeanor after misdemeanor, the way in which every mistake you make, or let's say you smoke a joint, well, a lot of people in Philly are smoking a joint. For this young man, it means the judge might decide he has to go into this training or, again, back to prison. And so I think it's for the better that important actors, including, maybe most importantly, DAs, are starting to say, we can't just stare into the sun and look at the biggest cases. We have to think about little ways in which criminal law can really undermine people's lives.
One of the things I'm always struck by is when we look at the prison population, clearly there is a disproportionate number of people in color there. But many of those people get out. And when we look at the felon population in the United States and in cities like Philly, it's disproportionately people of color, but these are much larger numbers. By some accounts, millions upon millions of people who may be on probation, who are in situations like his. He's rich, though.
Yes.
He has money to fight. It's not the case for a lot of other people.
That's exactly right. Look, there are probably, as best as we can tell, twice the number of people, again, who are in prison. So double again the number of people in prison are under some sort of supervision.
Let's put that in concrete terms so that we can figure out what that is. So
sometimes it's hard to know because, of course, there are different populations and different statistics. People have to remember that we have both state and federal prisoners. But it's an estimate of something like 2.3 million people are in prison, and then again that number presumably, of which, if African Americans are 13% of the population, roughly 30% of prisoners are African American, and roughly 20% of prisoners again are Hispanics. So,
and that's in prison. So when you're saying, when you consider the people outside who are on probation, that number doubles.
And these are people who already have a lot to fight for, right? Which is to say, we shouldn't be naive and pretend it's terribly easy if you are growing up in a rough neighborhood in Philly to do well anyway. Indeed, one stunning study showed that an African American without a felony conviction still had a harder time in an audit study getting a job interview than a white person with a felony conviction. So think of what it means if you are on probation, if, like Meek's, you can be put in prison for 5 months for a technical violation of your probation. One of the things he complained about the most is that his probation often stopped him from leaving the county, Philadelphia County. If you're a rapper, if you're a guy who's putting on shows all across the country, that just means you can't work. And one of the problems with this case, if we want to dive into the weeds, is that, well, it seems like the court thinks so too. The appellate court thinks so too, but Meeks' team has made motions implying that she has started to cross the bounds from being a dispassionate or even observant judge. There are reports that she would show up to watch him do community service. There are reports that the judge would do this. That's very odd, obviously. There are reports that she's interested in who he signs with in terms of his music label. She has friends in the music industry. I obviously can't confirm these reports, but look, we are all for judges. I think we as a society should be all for judges taking a compassionate view, trying to find creative ways and not jailing people. And judges have vast power when somebody consistently violates their probation orders. The problem is, if your probation order is permanent limbo, perpetual limbo, then it'll always be the case that there's a way in which you're violating this. And that's the kind of world Meeks has slipped into. And as you point out, were he less famous, none of us would notice it.
Why are so many people supporting him? Is it just his fame, or are there other issues at play?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful moment that we've started to think about the little ways in which somebody can be, as you well put it, under the boot of a criminal law system. And the reason I really care about this case, the reason I think it's a thoughtful case, is because we don't need to pretend that he's a perfect young man or a saint, or that he doesn't need to make better decisions. To say it's still the case that the state can't hover around or ominously around you for 11 years of your adult life, waiting for every mistake you make to reintroduce itself, to lock you up again, to sanction you to another program, and most importantly, to stop you from working when you're building a career. He ought to be able to mature, make mistakes, and stay within the important ways in which the law governs us, just like everybody else.
If we could touch very briefly about that other Pennsylvania case, the Cosby case, your view, prosecution, defense, how are they doing?
It's been an odd case. Obviously, it's the retrial, and one of the things we've noticed is that this retrial, the defense team has been much more aggressive. Rather than simply play defense, they've decided to go in sort of guns blazing. So this prosecution team is painting the accusers as more or less just gold diggers who are trying to come up with, any story that lets them extort Bill Cosby. I think they've got a tough road to hoe. Indeed, one of the things that the judge let come into this trial was that there had been settlements for literally millions of dollars. I think the report is $3.2 million in prior civil cases. And so it's hard to know why it is that we would think that now they're going for some wealth or fame.
Do you think that works for those women or against the women, the fact that they got money?
It's always hard to know how a jury will interpret things. There's, like any dinner conversation you have, there's an uncle who says, look, they got money, they're just getting paid off. Other people, I think, will more calmly ask the question, if they've already been paid for their civil damages, why is their heart still in this fight? And Bill Cosby, like everybody, is entitled to the presumption of innocence, but these are shocking and damning allegations, and these women, to my eye, look like brave women who are willing to stand up to a lot of power.